Have you ever stood beside someone and felt something unspoken pulsing in the silence? Something deeper than words, yet too fragile to name? Love, in its truest form, often hides behind restraint, fear, and unconscious longing. He may not say he loves you, he may even deny it to himself. But if you learn to read beneath the surface, into his gestures, his presence, his reactions, you'll see a language far more honest than words. Because the soul speaks in symbols long before the mouth dares to speak in truths. When a man is deeply in love but unwilling or unready to admit it, the psyche often speaks before the mouth ever does. One of the most revealing ways it expresses this truth is through his consistent, often unexplained presence. He orbits around you, not in grand gestures, but in subtle, repeated patterns of proximity. He might not confess his feelings, but he will find reasons to linger a little longer in your space, to cross paths even when the logic doesn't demand it. This is not mere coincidence, nor is it a strategy. It is the symbolic language of the unconscious manifesting itself in the physical world. Something within him is magnetized toward you, and though his ego may not yet permit the realization of love, his behavior forms the map of what his inner self already knows. These patterns are rarely loud. He may volunteer for tasks he previously showed no interest in, only because they put him near you. He may time his entrances or exits to align with yours, or insert himself into your conversations without any pressing need, and if you were to ask him why, he might shrug, joke, or offer a reason so ordinary it becomes almost suspicious in its simplicity. That's because he doesn't know fully why he's doing it. His conscious mind is still catching up with the deeper truth that has already taken root in his unconscious. This orbit is not about control, it is about presence. The man who cannot declare his love with words begins to speak it through consistency. When life offers him hundreds of directions to move in, and he still, somehow, repeatedly ends up near you, what you're witnessing is not randomness, it's emotional gravity. His soul has identified a place of resonance, and until his conscious mind catches up, he will keep circling that resonance like a star drawn to its own light. These moments of unnecessary nearness are not simply habits, they are symbolic acts. In depth psychology, we understand that the psyche, when in conflict, seeks expression in indirect ways. His orbit around you is one such expression, a silent confession, written not in language, but in movement. When a man is deeply in love, but hasn't allowed himself to admit it, the unconscious mind takes over in ways far more revealing than anything he could say out loud. One of the clearest signs is how deeply he remembers the smallest, most seemingly insignificant details about you. These are not the facts that serve a practical purpose. They are fragments of you, your preferences, your phrases, your stories, that he stores without effort. To the casual observer, it may seem trivial, but to the trained eye, it is one of the most powerful indicators of unconscious attachment. This kind of memory is not logical, it is emotional. The mind forgets what it deems irrelevant, but the soul retains what it cannot bear to lose. When he recalls something you mentioned weeks or months ago, a type of tea you prefer, a book that made you cry, the name of your childhood pet, it is not just memory at play, it is emotional imprinting. Your words didn't just pass through his ears, they lingered. They nested somewhere in his psyche because they came from you, and though he may not consciously understand why he holds on to these fragments, their presence in his memory tells the deeper story. He values what is connected to you because, on some internal level, you have become significant to him. This level of remembering defies logic. He may forget things he's told to remember, miss appointments, or overlook details in other areas of life. But when it comes to you, the retention is sharp, focused, intimate. It's not just about the facts. It's about the emotional context. He doesn't just remember what you said. He remembers how you looked when you said it. The tone in your voice, the way your energy shifted in that moment, that's how deeply your presence has penetrated his emotional field. This unconscious remembering is also a form of emotional possession, not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense that something of you now lives in him. Your existence has begun to shape his inner world, quietly influencing the way he sees, feels, and responds. And until he acknowledges the depth of what he feels, these small remembered details will continue to surface, not because he's trying to win you over, but because some part of him already has. When a man is deeply in love but not yet willing to consciously confront or admit that love, one of the clearest signs is how he manages emotional tension when vulnerability enters the room. Instead of leaning into openness or allowing himself to speak from the heart, he begins to deflect. This deflection often appears in the form of humor, sarcasm, or intellectual distance. These are not just personality traits or conversational habits. They are psychological defense mechanisms. They serve to protect the self from the perceived danger of exposure. Love, especially unspoken love, carries with it the risk of rejection, of losing control, of disrupting the identity a man has carefully constructed. And so, when he begins to feel those intense emotions surfacing in your presence, he may hide behind jokes or clever remarks to avoid confronting what the moment is truly asking of him. This behavior is not a lack of depth, but a sign of inner conflict. There is the part of him that feels deeply, anchoringly, sincerely, and then there is the part that fears what those feelings might mean. In psychological terms, this is a split between the conscious ego and the unconscious emotional body. The ego seeks to preserve its stability and clarity, but love disrupts those borders. It threatens to undo control, to challenge long-held patterns of independence or guardedness. That's why, when something real starts to emerge, like emotional closeness, a heart-level conversation, or a moment of intimacy, he quickly changes the channel. He might laugh, intellectualize, or dismiss the topic with a wave of the hand. It's not disinterest, it's fear wrapped in familiarity. This form of avoidance reveals how much he actually feels. If he were indifferent, he would not need to defend himself from the conversation. Indifference requires no armor, but emotional intensity, that demands psychological self-protection, especially if the individual has not yet made peace with his capacity for vulnerability. His use of humor or philosophical detachment is not a wall meant to push you away. It's a veil to shield a heart that is already exposed, even if he doesn't realize it. In these moments, if you observe closely, you may notice a flicker of something genuine beneath the mask, a hesitation before the joke, a softening of the eyes before the sarcasm, a silence after his intellectual monologue. Those are the cracks in the defense, and through them the light of his unspoken love can often be glimpsed. When a man is deeply in love, but remains unaware of or unwilling to acknowledge it, one of the most revealing signs can be observed in how he reacts when you speak of other men. These reactions are rarely loud or direct. They exist in the space between words, in the shifts of body language, in the quiet fluctuations of his emotional tone. He may not express overt jealousy or attempt to control the conversation, but something in his demeanor changes the moment another male figure enters the narrative of your attention. His posture may tighten subtly, his tone may become slightly dismissive, or he might interrupt with a joke or sarcasm to diffuse his discomfort. These are not random reactions. They are emotional leaks from a place within him that feels threatened, even if his rational mind has not granted permission to feel this way. Jealousy, in this context, is not possessiveness in the traditional sense. It is a signal from the unconscious. It reveals that his psyche has already formed a bond with you, even though he has not consciously acknowledged it. The threat he perceives is not about rivalry. It's about the emotional discomfort of realizing that your attention could belong elsewhere. That discomfort exposes the value he places on your presence, your approval, and your emotional closeness. His reactions may seem subtle, but they are involuntary. His unconscious pulling back the veil of indifference for a moment, only to quickly replace it. He may try to rationalize this behavior if confronted. He might claim he was just joking or that he doesn't really care who you're with, but that's the defense mechanism talking. His discomfort, his withdrawal, or his sudden shift in tone is not a performance. It's a reflex. These responses emerge when something deeply valued feels endangered, when connection feels threatened by potential displacement. This inner turbulence is not something he can control easily, because it doesn't originate from his conscious mind. It is rooted in the emotional body, raw, vulnerable, and reactive. In these moments, what you're witnessing is not just a response to external stimuli. It's the revealing of an internal truth. The unconscious knows what the ego resists. His subtle jealousy is the psyche's confession that he feels more than he is willing to say, and in that moment his love becomes visible, not in what he says, but in what he cannot hide. When a man is deeply in love, but hasn't yet acknowledged or accepted this truth within himself, one of the most powerful and least recognized signs lies in how his emotional energy shifts in your presence. This is not something he consciously controls. Rather, it is a spontaneous reaction from the depths of his unconscious mind, an instinctual response to the psychological and emotional significance you hold for him. Love, even unspoken, is not subtle in its effect. It disturbs the inner equilibrium and reveals itself in the way the body reacts, the way the tone changes, and the way time begins to move differently when he's near you. You may notice that he becomes either more grounded or more unsettled the moment you enter the room. If he finds a sense of calm in your presence, speaks more slowly, listens more attentively, seems more present, it is because something in you provides a symbolic sense of safety or resonance that his soul recognizes, even if his mind cannot explain. Conversely, if he becomes fidgety, more nervous, or suddenly animated, it is not because of discomfort with you, but because his unconscious is activated. Your presence disrupts his usual pattern of control and self-containment, drawing feelings to the surface that have not yet found conscious integration. This emotional shift may be subtle, but it is persistent. You may notice he suddenly clears his throat more, adjusts his posture, or loses his train of thought. These are somatic signs, physical manifestations of a psychological conflict. These emotional shifts are particularly revealing because they are not performed for attention. They are involuntary. He may not even notice the changes himself, but they are evidence that something within him is moved, stirred, or challenged by your presence. You are not just another person to him. You are a mirror reflecting something he hasn't yet fully seen within himself. Your presence becomes a kind of psychic stimulus that activates buried feelings, internal questions, and emotional longing. His nervous system begins to sync with the weight of this significance, and in doing so, he shows you, without ever saying a word, that your existence affects him at a level he has yet to put into language. This inner transformation cannot be faked or manufactured. It's the soul's way of signaling that something sacred is being touched. When a man is deeply in love, but unable to admit it, his love often reveals itself in subtle acts of protection. This protectiveness isn't always bold or obvious. It rarely takes the form of grand gestures or dramatic interventions. Instead, it exists quietly in the background, woven into the spaces where no one else is looking. He will notice when you're tired before you say a word. He'll stand a little closer when the room feels uncomfortable. He'll ask if you've eaten, if you got home safe, if the person who spoke to you earlier made you uncomfortable, not because it's his role or duty, but because some part of him is deeply invested in your well-being. And the paradox is that he may not even realize why he does it. His behavior is not driven by logic, but by an emotional compass pointing toward you. In psychology, these kinds of subtle actions arise from an unconscious sense of emotional responsibility. He may not call it love, but his instincts betray him. He scans the environment for what might distress you. He intervenes gently when something could cause you discomfort. He offers help without being asked, not because he wants recognition, but because caring for you feels natural. These actions don't come from a desire to impress. They come from a place where his identity and your presence are already entangled, even if no one has spoken that truth aloud. The most fascinating part of this quiet protectiveness is how often he will downplay it. If you thank him, he'll brush it off. If you ask why he noticed something no one else did, he might laugh or shrug. But the reality is, he's observing more closely than he wants to admit, not in a controlling way, but in a way that reveals you have become part of his internal landscape. Your comfort, safety, and emotional peace are no longer external to him. They have become part of his concern, even his stability. This kind of care is the unconscious acting on behalf of the heart. And because he hasn't fully integrated his feelings into conscious awareness, the love emerges sideways, through concern, through gentleness, through the invisible shield he tries to hold up when the world touches you too roughly. He may never say the words, but the depth of his concern speaks for him. His soul has already made the decision his mouth cannot yet express. When a man is deeply in love but hasn't yet recognized or admitted it, one of the most profound signals emerges in the unconscious synchronization of emotional states. He begins to mirror you, not consciously, not as mimicry or performance, but in a deeper psychological alignment that reveals the bond forming beneath the surface. If you are joyful, his energy lifts. If you are withdrawn, he becomes quieter. If you are anxious, he starts to carry tension in his own body. This mirroring is not about imitation, it is resonance. It is what happens when two emotional fields begin to overlap. In psychological terms, this is a nonverbal attunement, a limbic response that shows his inner world is no longer operating independently of yours. Such behavior is rarely dramatic. He won't announce that he's mirroring you, and he likely doesn't even realize it's happening. But if you observe closely, you will notice the subtle rhythm of this connection. Your sadness will reflect in the softening of his voice. Your happiness will live in the lightness of his tone. The pacing of his speech, his posture, even his silence may begin to reflect yours, as though some unspoken agreement between your nervous systems has been reached. This level of responsiveness cannot be manufactured. It comes from genuine emotional investment and the unconscious desire to stay close to your experience. In this kind of mirroring, he is not trying to impress or manipulate. He is being moved by something within him that he has not yet named. His emotional body recognizes you as meaningful, and so it tunes itself to your frequency, and though he may rationally deny any deep attachment, his presence betrays him. The more in sync he becomes with your emotional states, the clearer it is that you have entered his internal world. You live not just in his mind, but in his mood, in his breath, in the subtle shifts of his emotional tone. This mirroring is a sacred form of intimacy, one that precedes spoken truth. It is the unconscious saying, "I feel what you feel. I carry what you carry. You are no longer other. You are part of me." When this happens, it is no longer a question of whether he loves you. It is only a matter of time before his conscious self catches up with what his deeper self already knows. Love that has not yet been admitted does not mean love that does not exist. In fact, the love that remains unspoken is often the most revealing. It shows itself in the way he lingers without reason, in how he remembers the details others overlook, in how his humor rises when emotions threaten to surface. It lives in the quiet tension when you mention someone else, in the shifts in his energy when you enter the room, in the subtle ways he guards you without drawing attention. It whispers in the way he mirrors your mood, as though your emotional state has become his own. These are not surface-level behaviors. They are psychic indicators, unconscious expressions of a bond that his rational mind has not yet accepted. But the unconscious does not wait for permission. It moves first, reveals first, loves first, and if you've seen these signs, then you already know the truth. His soul has chosen you, long before he's been able to say the words.